So welcome everyone. This is our communication masterclass for parents. My name is Lauren Ezel. I'm the head of community at Maple. We're a household organizational tool to help parents and all households really work better together in making running your life smoother. And so I invite you to check us out at growmaple.com. We're going to jump in today with Lauren. And Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself and lasting, and just who are you? What's your title? What's lasting? And then what does family life look like for you?
Yeah. So my name is Lauren Weir, and I am a licensed professional counselor, and I work for Lasting, which is a wing of Talkspace. And our thing is that we create self-guided therapy tools to make therapy accessible for all people. So the goal is to have people have stronger relationships and navigate life's challenges using self-guided tools. And my role there is I'm the head of family therapy. So this is a great topic for me. I love all parenting related topics. And also because I am a parent, my husband and I have 4 children ranging in age from 4 all the way up to almost 18 and going off to college. So we're doing all of the parenting things right now.
Amazing. And I love your breadth of experience. The toddler years, the baby years to the teenage years. And it's so different. Every year is different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So being in any relationship is hard. It comes with ups and downs. And in order to keep that relationship healthy, we need to find ways to effectively communicate. So many times we have different communication styles, different ways of approaching things. And when you throw kids into the mix, Lauren, it gets hard. It gets really hard. So this class will focus on 3 main points. We have 1, effective communication. Lauren's going to take us through those steps and what that looks like. The second one is raising a child. And the third one is sharing that load. So let's jump in because I'm super excited to learn too. I have a feeling I'm going to be implementing these in my own life and relationship. Okay. So Lauren, can you walk us through what healthy communication looks like?
Yes. So I like to focus on sort of 2 facets of healthy communication. And one is just in your approach to healthy communication. And so some of what I'm talking about when I say that are just kind of what are some of the underlying principles in terms of how you approach communication, particularly about difficult topics. So paying attention to some of those nonverbals, like what does your body look like when you're approaching a difficult topic with your partner? Do you have an open physical stance? Are you within close proximity to them? Or do you look closed off? Is your body communicating anger or frustration? Also, just even tone of voice, the way that we speak, and the tone of the words we use, whether we're making eye contact, all of those nonverbals, they can either really support what we're trying to communicate, or they can really detract from what we're trying to communicate and start our partner kind of on a defensive track. And so that I think, and I think the other thing just about approach is, thinking through, not just the way that you're approaching the communication, but when you're doing it and how you're doing it. So sometimes, in the moment when something's happening, we want to just say something, but maybe it's not a great time, especially if it's broaching on something that maybe needs a little more conversation. And so I really encourage planning around difficult topics. If, my partner and I are getting our kids ready for school in the morning and he does something that's annoying to me, that may not be, and in fact, probably is not the best time to approach it. But saying to him, hey, after the kids go to bed tonight, can we check in? I would really love to talk to you about our morning routine. So kind of giving him a little bit of space to say yes or no and consent to that conversation, or maybe even suggest a different time if he prefers. So those are kind of like, just I think really key kind of initial things to be thinking about. And then of course, there's the way that we are approaching conversation and communication. And I think we all know kind of inherently some of the pitfalls with this, but I think it is really helpful just to remember that the way that we make statements is important. And so, I think the easiest place to go when we're upset about something is to say, you always do this, or you don't do that. But keeping in mind that I statements are much more powerful. And so I feel is a really good way to start a sentence. It's taking ownership for sort of your response to a particular stimulus or something that's bothering you, and communicating something that, presuming that your partner cares very deeply about you. They care how you feel. So sharing with them how you feel about something is a really, really good and helpful way to approach difficult conversations. So those are some basics. I mean, there are many other things. I think, being assertive but kind in the way that we communicate. So I kind is one of my favorite words.
Yeah.
It's different than nice to me, but it's it's expressing something in a way that shows care, and it's not being passive. It's taking ownership. It's okay to assert yourself in a conversation and take ownership for how you feel about something and something that you need. But not being, aggressive, which I think is sometimes the other stance that we often feel we have to take when we're feeling upset and we want to get an idea across powerfully.
Yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing is, look at your approach. Is it the right time? Is it the right space?
Mm-hmm.
Could you let your partner know in the moment, like, hey, I want to check in about this later?
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure when you go to start that conversation, you're checking in on your tone of voice. You're checking in on, I just wrote a few things down here to like reiterate so that I'm also understanding your nonverbals. So are you making eye contact? What does your physical stance look like, et cetera, et cetera? This is all really good. So once you sort of establish the correct space, you're making sure that you are in a healthy place to communicate with your nonverbals and you've set your tone correctly. Can you talk a little bit about like those communication skills and steps? Is there sort of like a template that you can give us for the way that you would talk to your partner?
Absolutely. So, I mean, other than the underlying principle of making I statements, I think some of the things that we can do in conversation that are really helpful is expressing appreciation and validation and empathy for our partner's perspective as well. And, when I say express appreciation, it's not, the goal there is not to manipulate your partner by saying like, okay, I'm going to say this one nice thing and then I can say these two negative things. And it's not to try to set them up, but actually what we've learned is that appreciation and gratitude, they promote the reward centers of our brain. These are like healthy relational things to do in interactions. And actually they increase neurochemicals like oxytocin, which are feel good hormones, feel good things that happen in us when we're in relationship. And so expressing appreciation is like partnering with your partner. It's saying, here is something that I really value about you. And also, and I think that's just good to create in general in a culture and of a family. But in difficult conversations, it's really helpful to express those things as well, so that it's not just a negative approach, but that you're actually having these chemical things happen between you that are connecting the two of you.
Yeah.
And then the other piece of that, I think, really is validation and empathy. So having, we want to do something called reflective listening. So it's being able to hear what our partner is saying to us and then reflect back to them what we think we've heard. And one of the things that does in conversation is it sort of takes out the misunderstandings that often happen, by saying, hey, I think what I'm hearing you say is this, is that right?
Yes.
We're giving our partner a chance to respond to that and either correct something that we've gotten wrong, or to say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And it's so helpful to have said it, right? Like, oh, I hear you saying that this matters to you. And it allows us to show empathy for their perspective, even when we don't agree with their perspective.
Yeah.
So I would say those are some of the really, really key components of that back and forth relationship, is allowing space for your partner to share, to listen, to reflect back, and it creates kind of that healthy pattern of communication.
This is like so helpful to hear. A couple of things were coming to mind while you were talking, Lauren. I think one, the gratitude, the expressing appreciation to make sure that you still maintain that strong relationship with your partner. So, something we always talk about at Maple too, and how you build that foundation by continuing to express that you're grateful or you appreciate and you validate the things that they're doing. You're seeing it, and how that important that is to the other person. The other thing is the empathy. And I love checking in to make sure that you're understanding. So you close that feedback loop. And I think that's somewhere, even in my own relationship where my partner and I really struggle, that he's saying something, I'm hearing something different.
Yeah.
So I liked that checking in. This is what I'm hearing you say. Is that right? And it gives them an opportunity to say, no, that's not actually what I'm saying. Let me try a different way.
Yeah, I think one of the pitfalls we fall into in relationships is by thinking that either we're really good mind readers or that our partner is a really good mind reader. And so creating that sort of cadence for conversation where you're going back and forth really helps dispel some of that mind reading that we either expect of our partner or we're doing towards them.
Right. Yeah. So expressing appreciation, validating what you're hearing, and then showing empathy, giving empathy. And then I'm assuming what comes off of that is like solution finding.
Yeah.
Like problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. And you used a great word, foundation. I mean, that's, once you have sort of solidified a foundation for healthy communication, you're attacking something as a team versus being, you may even have different perspectives, but you're working together, right? Instead of against each other, which is the goal.
Yeah, totally. I love that. So now that we've gone through sort of these steps, we're going to put together an example scenario. And I think when we were writing up these scenarios, we were trying to figure out what is something that almost every relationship goes through. And we were just trying to come up with sort of an infrastructure that you could then apply this scenario to a bunch of different things. So this is what we came up with. Our example scenario. You ask your partner to do something and they don't do it. So partner one says, hey, babe, can you please lock the doors when you're the last one in at night? And your partner says, sure, no problem. And then the situation arises that partner one discovers that the doors are in fact not locked a few days later at night. Partner one responds, using the skill set, hey, maybe it's in the morning. And to your point, Lauren, you're getting the kids ready for school. You're getting out the door. It's kind of chaos. Not the right time to talk to your partner, from what I'm hearing you say, about the doors not being locked, and probably doesn't set you up for effective communication. So you wait. Hey, babe, later tonight after the kids are in bed, could we check in for like 5 minutes? Partner goes, sure, great. So you already have allocated time later in the evening to check in about it. Later that evening, how do you approach your partner? From listening to what you're saying, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And you tell me how this goes.
Do it.
Okay. So I would say, hey, babe, I know things are chaotic in the morning, so I wanted to check in with you tonight about locking the doors. We had previously talked and I had asked if you could lock the doors. You said you would. And I noticed this morning that the doors weren't locked. I know sometimes it's hard to remember. There's so many things at night, making sure all the lights are off, the kids are tucked in, Maggie's, the dog's inside the house. So I totally understand that it can be a lot, but could you please try to lock the doors at night? It makes me feel safer.
Yeah.
Is there anything there that I'm leaving out or a better way that I could do that?
No, I mean, I think that's a great approach. It's, I love that you, said something about why it matters to you. You also acknowledged that you understand your partner has a lot on their plate and it's hard to remember things. Your tone of voice and like facial expressions were open. So I think all of that is great. I think if there was anything I would add, it would maybe just be asking a question, like an open-ended question, which can also just be helpful to solicit thoughtful responses from our partner. So, something along the lines of, how can I help you remember this, or what might help you remember this? But soliciting some feedback of, kind of about, what is making this difficult, how do you feel about this? Is this feeling like this is too much of a burden for you, or is this something you can do for me? But I think, that's maybe the only thing I would add.
I like that because it gives them a chance to sort of talk, and it's not just you talking at them.
Mhm.
And I like this situation because it applies across the board, right? Your partner leaves dishes in the sink. Your partner, like in my case, my husband gets really upset when I forget to close the garage door, and I do that often. And so it could be something like that. It could be not forgetting to pay the mortgage. Hey, you said you would take care of that. So let's just say we had the conversation between our partner, we moved on, and then we find out, partner one finds out a few days later, doors are not locked again. I would love to hear. I'm actually like ready.
The stakes are higher now.
Stakes are higher now. How on earth do you approach that conversation without it turning into a fight? Because I think that's where, you get frustrated. So feelings of frustration are now in play, probably by both parties, because party number two is probably frustrated that they forgot and they don't want to have this conversation again. So,
and I think the easy thing for a partner too is to feel a little defensive about that, right? I mean, there's that automatic kind of knee-jerk reaction of knowing you made a mistake, you didn't keep a promise that you made. And so for the partner one who's making the request, again, I think, setting up a time to talk, getting consent for that conversation. Can we talk about this tonight? I think the thing that I would emphasize in that follow-up conversation would maybe be putting a little more emphasis on why that's something that matters. So in this case, it might be something like, I've been having trouble sleeping at night. I find myself waking up and feeling nervous about the doors not being locked. And I had this experience in college where I was really afraid that someone broke in. So this is why it matters to me. And then again, sort of soliciting that feedback, how does that feel to hear me say that about why it matters to me? Because I think what we end up feeling like when we're the partner making the request is that we're just being nagging. And so that's probably something that I would and have shared with my spouse before, hey, when I feel like I have to make these requests multiple times, I feel like it puts me in the position of feeling like it's my responsibility to nag you about this. And that is something that, given my own history, is really problematic for me. I don't like feeling like a nag. And again, soliciting that feedback. So how can you support me in this? Because I don't want to feel like this. This is not a great way to feel. And this is not a good dynamic for our relationship. How can we rethink how we're doing this? Yeah.
I like that. And I like, again, asking that open-ended question to get your partner involved in the discussion and the problem solving. And I don't always think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, but I don't always think that having these discussions in front of the kids is a bad thing. As a parent, your kids are learning effective communication off of modeling. And so, we try to be careful, not fight around the kids too much. But if we do fight around the kids, something I just wanted to mention is we make it a point to make up around the kids, because what we found, and actually another parent was going to therapy and had mentioned this to us, and then we started doing it too because I thought it was so good, is that we were fighting, but then we were making up behind closed doors. So our kids never saw us resolve the problem. And so I thought, we can't always check in later. Sometimes, like, you do have a discussion in the moment, or if that happens and you find things are getting heated, maybe take a break and later, come back as parents and model that healthy problem solving to your kids in front of them. What do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. And I will say, in terms of the planning for conversations, it isn't always planning for a time when the kids aren't around. It's more of an awareness of when is and when is not a helpful moment to have a conversation. And we do know that those conflicts are going to come up. We might be in the car with our kids, right? And my husband makes a wrong turn and that turns into a conflict. So we know that conflict happens in front of our children. And in fact, it is really healthy for them to see a degree of conflict. I'm not a fan of having conflict about the kids in front of the kids. That's the one caveat I would probably, or very adult themed conversations. Like those are, there are certain things that I feel like are off limits, but the day-to-day conflict is healthy because you're right. our children will also experience conflict in life. And we have the opportunity to do two things, I think, when we have conflict in front of our kids. One is to kind of destigmatize conflict. I have a son who is particularly kind of conflict averse, and I actually think it's really helpful for him to see my partner and I have conflict, because as long as we're controlling our emotions and not like having it feel scary for them, for him to see, it's okay for us to share that our partner did something that was irritating to us or frustrating to us. Like, we have complex emotions as adults. And then the second piece, you nailed it. Absolutely. Our kids being able to see us effectively work through conflict is also really helpful, because they need those skills, right? And we don't want to have our kids be conflict averse, right? We don't want them to feel like having conflict is, don't assert yourself, don't say what you're thinking or feeling in a situation, because the goal is to always avoid conflict.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so we have a second example for healthy communication. And it is that you and your partner in a fight, and we touched a little bit on this, but maybe we can go over anything that we missed. You feel like your partner is not spending enough quality time with the family. So there's a caveat, which is that both parties are feeling frustrated in this moment and can't seem to find middle ground. So parent number one says something along the lines of, you're always working. You're always prioritizing work over family. And I've asked you at a minimum to join us 3 days a week for family dinner. And you're either late or you're distracted and on your phone. And parent two says, work is really busy right now. I have a ton on, and a lot is riding on my team and I have to be there. I don't have a choice. And parent one comes back with, well, I'm busy too. We're all busy. I have a ton on my plate. People depend on me too. How can you say that your work needs are more important than my own work needs? How do we find resolution in this sort of scenario?
Yeah. So I think what's happening in that situation with these parents is that they're both sort of siloed in their own perspective. So, partner A is approaching it or partner one is approaching it in kind of an accusatory way. You are always, which is, it's not helpful to make always statements, first of all, because it's rarely true. And so I think, I would really encourage checking those words at the door. But again, kind of being able to say something more along the lines of kind of taking ownership for the way it's making you feel again. So, I'm really struggling because I expressed that this was something that was really meaningful to me. And, you haven't been here for dinner. What's going on? Because there's an invitation in that, right? It's an invitation to partner two to say, work's been really busy. I want to be home for dinner. And automatically you can feel the difference in that, right? Your partner one is offering partner two the space to say, work is really busy. I'm not enjoying this. And then I think from there it does, because you've already deflected so much of the tension, and you're probably still feeling it. Both partners are probably feeling stressed out and upset. It doesn't go away automatically. But what you've realized is that you both care about the same thing, which is you both want to be there for dinner. There's this external force, which is the really busy work, that's kind of the enemy. And how can we kind of attack that together? So that would be kind of like how I would first approach that. And then, I think being able to share those feelings of frustration, feelings of frustration or anger in and of themselves are not the problem. It's the way that we express them. And when we start to do that sort of attacking communication, again, we're putting our partners on the defensive, and sort of creating those like siloed perspectives instead of being able to say, this is really harmful to our family. I'm struggling with this. I don't like having dinner with the kids alone every night of the week or most nights of the week. And we want you there. How can we support you in being there more often?
Yeah. I love this sort of common theme that you keep bringing up, which is inviting your partner to do problem solving with you and asking your partner how you can support them when their behavior is something that's affecting you, maybe in a negative way, and not automatically accusing them, and instead saying, hey, I can see that this is happening. It's not fun for us either. What can we do? What can we do to work together to problem solve this? And it opens it up for partner number two to be able to say something along the lines of, So work weeks are really hard, work days, work nights. Maybe we could do something where Saturday is family day and I'm carving out 8 hours and no phones, no email, or whatever that looks like. So just giving both parties a chance to sort of communicate and problem solve together. So I really like that.
Yeah. And I love, Lauren, the just sort of creative strategizing, because I think we have to admit when there are, blockades to the things that we want to happen. So if mealtime is difficult during the week, yeah, let's find some weekend time, or, can we have a half an hour before the kids go to bed that you put your phone down, and we all put our phones down and we do something together. Let's play a game before the kids go to bed, or I think we can get creative and still have that connected time, even when we have these external forces that get in the way.
Yeah. And, it's so hard. I talk to so many parents, and just during the pandemic alone, when you have so much of the work from home lines are blurred, and it's really hard to separate. And so being able to like effectively talk and find time together as a family is really, really lovely. Especially right now when it's hard to find that time.
Yeah. And I think it's important for kids too, right? Because I mean, my family can definitely attest to kind of those blurred boundaries within the last couple of years, with my partner and I are both working from home all the time. And so, yeah, for them to see that I am putting my computer down at certain times, and committing to family time, and same for my partner, like kids need that.
Yeah. And seeing a boundary, this is the boundary, we're going to stick to it, is really healthy. Okay. Let's talk about raising a child. We talked about effective communication, healthy communication. Let's talk about raising kids together. Lauren, how do we decide and follow a parenting style as a couple? I know this is something we really struggle with, and we can't seem to get on the same page. So what do you recommend?
So I think, just as a background, I think one of the things that we do as couples is that we partner up because we are aligned in certain ways, right? I mean, we have these ways that we like each other, we enjoy spending time together, we're connected. But then when we start a family together, it sort of does require a reset, but often we're not doing that reset, right? And we both, both partners in a relationship, when you're having kids, come to the table with their own experiences that are influencing how they parent. And so, first and foremost, I just really encourage a lot of conversation around parenting styles. And I think, some of that is, again, showing that appreciation, being able to say, hey, I can say there are things about the way my partner parents that, like, man, if I could do those things, it would be amazing. I'm really grateful he brings those things to the table. And I do well when I'm telling him those things instead of just, appreciate, like, wow, you are so much more relaxed than I am. And I really appreciate that. So I think it is being able to say that, but it's also having a mutual commitment to the various roles and responsibilities. And I think really talking through that, because what can happen is that we end up in these roles that we didn't necessarily choose, or we're kind of defaulting to those things. And maybe you like your role and maybe you don't. Maybe there's some things about it that you'd like to shift. And particularly when those things become kind of these rigid roles where, maybe one parent is the nurturer and one parent's the enforcer. And if you're the parent that's the enforcer, you may feel like, well, if I don't do this, it's not going to happen. And the same thing for the nurturer. Like, wow, I am kind of the more nurturing parent. If I don't do this, my child won't experience this. And so you're both kind of over here doing these two things, but you haven't talked about how you can maybe meld those styles a little bit. And so I like the word alignment a lot, because it doesn't mean you're doing the same thing. It's just saying how are our parenting styles kind of fitting together or aligning with one another? Where can one of us or both of us be more flexible? And offering healthy feedback, I think, as well. It's helpful to have your partner's feedback about how, they perceive you as a parent. And I think inviting that feedback is really healthy too.
Yeah, I love opening this up for discussion, because I don't think very many times my partner and I sit down and we talk about like what our parenting styles look like and how we might have better alignment between the two. It's just always, well, don't do this and we should do that. And we never talk about the way that we apply those things personally. So I really like that. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. Can you talk a little bit about how we could be a team when rearing a child through a difficult situation? Do you have any tips or like do's or don'ts of parent teamwork?
Yeah. I think one thing that's really helpful is to have agreement on rules and boundaries within the family. So, and some of this too just comes from, and I don't know that this is instinctive to talk about, but talking through, what are our family values and what is our family vision is a really actually super helpful thing to do, because then when you're experiencing those hard things, you have the same goal, right? Like this is kind of what we want for our family. So how do we parent towards that? Instead of just attacking each problem individually, which we do sometimes have to do. When hard seasons come up or we have behavioral things come up with our child. I mean, I definitely know that we have to sit down and say, okay, how are we going to parent this difficult thing, this hard thing we're doing right now. But if I know that my partner and I are aligned because we've talked about kind of what we value as parents for our children and for our family, then, that does help us work as a team. It's not just about attacking this problem. It's about saying, hey, we know that we really value our children being generous towards others and welcoming towards others. And if we see that our child is exhibiting a behavior that's not that way, we know that we can kind of team up in terms of how we approach this.
That's wonderful. I love that. And then let's say that we have a negative parenting decision. How can we navigate a negative parenting decision when we disagree? So I don't know if you need further.
No, go ahead. Yeah, maybe give a little more context.
Yeah. So let's say that my partner maybe did something that I didn't like. And we disagree on, my partner did something that I didn't like with the kids. And we disagree. He thought it was fine. He thinks that that's the way it should be. I don't think that's the way it should be. How do we navigate sort of that situation?
Yeah. So this is one area where I definitely would say that conversation should happen with outside of your children's earshot for sure. Just because, first and foremost, we want to make sure that our kids see us as being a team. That's incredibly important. And so I think in that situation, I would definitely encourage having a conversation when the kids aren't around. And, some of that is, sharing, hey, this is how I'm feeling about this. I didn't like that you did this. This is why that matters to me. And sometimes those things, just that in and of itself is helpful, because when we can hear each other's why, sometimes one person's why really trumps the others. And it's obvious. Sometimes one partner will have more at stake than the other. And this is often how we can compromise in situations where we don't agree. If I tell my partner that I didn't like the harsh tone of voice he used, and he thinks that's fine, and I say, that's really triggering for me because that's how my dad talked or something like that. He might say, oh, like, yeah, I do know that's an area of sensitivity for you. Let's think about this some more. I think it's, I think the other thing is there's a certain level of flexibility that we do have to have with our partners. And there will be times that we don't agree. And I think unless it's something that feels super high stakes to us, there does have to be some room for allowing our co-parent or partner to parent differently than us and to be supportive of their relationship with our children and the ways that they do that specifically. And I think that's a very hard thing for us to accept as parents and partners. You're shaking your head. Yes.
I remember, when both the babies were little, and I just really had a preference. And it sounds so crazy, but I really had a preference on how my kids were diapered. I wanted a certain way and I didn't want it too tight. And it stemmed from my youngest being colicky. And so any pressure around his stomach seemed to trigger him. And so I was just really all about loose diapers. And it caused kind of this situation with my partner where he felt like I was trying to control parenting style. And that was frustrating for him. And so I'm just nodding my head because I've totally been through something like that.
Yeah. And I think we do see this, there's often something like that that kind of triggers that. I see this a lot with parents who have a child with a medical complication or a special need. One parent often will kind of become the expert in that child's care. And so they're, maybe takes on more of that load. And then it's hard to trust the other parent to do it well. And then, yeah, it sort of spills over. It's not just about like taking your medication at the right time, but it's about the little things like diapering. And then we also see it too in blended families a lot when, maybe one person came in already as a parent and just had a stronger parental role. And then you maybe have a child together. And so, one of the parents doesn't have as much experience. And so it's easy to kind of fall into these patterns where one parent is the expert, and it's really hard to let go of the control of allowing that other parent to make mistakes and kind of learn their own style of doing things.
That's a really good point. I could see, I have a stepfather, and he had two kids before my mom and him got together, and they were much older than us. And so he had been through a lot. He had navigated, right, a lot of
Mhm.
real stuff that we went through in sort of middle school and high school, and he wanted to give his input, and that was hard for my mom because she wanted to do it. So I remember seeing that dynamic between them. So when you
Yeah.
totally it totally like flagged that memory for me. Okay, so let's go through an example scenario for raising a child together. This might be one a lot of parents experience, but the scenario is your child keeps hitting you or hitting another child. So, what is an effective way of responding to your child in this situation? How do you communicate with them? They're little, they don't really understand, they're having a lot of feelings that they can't communicate. What do you suggest?
Yeah. Well, so I love that example because we've all been there. I mean, most little kids do this. And we also know that that's like a pretty universally unacceptable behavior, right? So we can sort of like agree on that, right? Like this is not a behavior we want to promote in our children. With little kids, kids who are little and hitting, I mean, one of the things that I always say is that when it comes to a behavior that is a 3-year-old isn't going to hurt anyone really significantly, probably, but it is a behavior that like we really want to put a stop to. I always just say like you have to stop that behavior in the moment, but you have to do it very simply. So just something really like 2 words, like we don't hit. That's 3 words. We don't hit. Or you need to stop hitting right now. I mean, and it is okay to be firm with your child and communicate very clearly that that is not a behavior that is acceptable. There's parenting that has to happen sort of outside of that moment. But in the moment when your child is, something's triggered that, right? They're not just most likely randomly hitting some child. If they are, like maybe we need to kind of get to that too. But, often it's triggered by something. Little kids don't have the ability to express their emotions verbally. And so part of our job as parents is helping them learn to do that. So after they're removed from that situation, some of what we do as parents is guesswork. So it's, I saw you on the slide hit that little kid. And I think what you were feeling is frustrated because he butted in front of you. Is that right? And so it's getting at, there was something going on for you that was legitimate. Um, and honoring that and empathizing with that, and giving them the language for that. Let's think of a different way to handle that next time that you're feeling frustrated. And then again, it's kind of engaging them in that solution. Hey, if that happens again, what do you think you could do differently? Most 2 or 3-year-olds will say, I don't know. This is like a frequent conversation I have with my 4-year-old right now. So, I'm in that zone. I ask her these questions and she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, we've had this conversation so many times. Like, I think you maybe do know, but and so then it's saying, well, do you think you could try this? It's kind of, you have to like walk them through it, right? You got to give them baby steps.
My 4-year-old does the same thing.
Yeah.
He and my 6-year-old, man, they just, and this hitting thing is for us because they go after each other. They're both very strong-willed, and very, uh, they have like these personalities that are very big and extroverted.
Mhm.
So when get along, it's fantastic because they play together so well. But when they don't get along, it's like the other end of that where they're like throwing fists. And so we have to sit down and talk to them, what is something that you could do instead of hitting each other?
Mm.
And I love it because my eldest is always such the problem solver, and he's 6, so he's developmentally a bit further along. And he'll be like, well, maybe I'll tell Aiden, please stop. And I'll put my hand out. Don't hit me. I don't like when you do that. And my youngest goes, I'm going to come tell mommy next time.
Yep, absolutely.
Every time. That's fine. Just come tell me and I'll help sort of moderate.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you bring up a good point, which is that, as parents, we are just in a season of repetition. You're not doing something wrong because you have to keep doing it. I mean, even as adults, I think they say it takes like 21 days to develop a new habit. In kids, we can expect this to be a much more lengthy process. But, I can tell even just from the way that you're talking about your boys that clearly they've had this conversation. If they know the solutions and eventually they'll get there, right?
That's the hope. Like fingers.
Right. But, part of that is us, as parents also paying attention to what's happening within us in those moments, because, I will say that when my kids bicker, it's a trigger for me, and being able to notice when I'm essentially jumping into the fray and just bickering right back at them, like that's totally an ineffective strategy. Right. So I have to slow myself down enough to pay attention to, like, wow, my heart is racing a little bit because my kids are bickering, and that really bothers me. I don't like that feeling. What's happening? What do I need to do to calm myself down enough that I can actually engage them in an effective solution to this instead of just essentially feeding that cycle that's happening?
Such a good point, because I am so triggered when my kids hit each other.
Mhm.
And it's like you could never imagine getting angry with your child when they're sweet and little. And it's like, I just don't understand how anyone could be mad at their kid. And then they inflict pain on each other, and you're like, I'm going to kill you both. And I don't know.
Yes, it's very triggering for us as parents, and like in our finer moments, and when our kids are being sweet, it is impossible for us to imagine the kind of anger that we can feel towards our children. But
3 seconds later, it's
yeah,
like 1 minute later, my emotions are ping ponging.
yeah, absolutely.
It's hard as a parent to get your emotions under control. And that was the biggest thing that I learned, Lauren, as a parent, is that I don't have a good handle on my emotions.
Mhm.
And I don't self-regulate very well. And so how can I expect my 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old to manage that?
Absolutely.
I, at almost 40, can't do it or struggle with it. And
Yeah.
so that for me, it was just like an aha moment, and really helped me take a deep breath and learn some coping mechanisms that I'm trying to teach my kids.
Mhm.
Wow, mommy feels really frustrated right now. And just verbalizing that to my kids so they can see that I am also struggling with those emotions.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
it's so healthy for kids to see that. I mean, we talked about conflict between parents, but the same thing applies when we are having conflict with our children. I mean, for them to know that we struggle with big emotions, I mean, they are wrestling with those same things. And, it's so healthy for us to be able to share with them, hey, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. And I think I need to take a minute to calm myself down. I mean, I've given myself mommy timeouts with my kids before and just said, I need to give myself a timeout because I know that if I stay in this situation, I'm going to say something that I regret. And I don't want to do that to you. And that's actually good because then they're like, oh,
yeah.
we can do that. Like, we can ask for that permission to step out of a hard situation and gather our thoughts and feelings. And those things do come with, I mean, I'm right there with you, Lauren. I have had to work very hard on parental regulation of myself.
Really hard. And I didn't ever realize I struggled with it until I had kids.
Yeah.
As the amount of emotions on a daily basis that you're dealing with are extraordinary.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's get back into the example scenario. Maybe could we talk about how do we get on the same page with our partner about escalation of consequences if the behavior, like hitting, as the example, continues?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think this is where having those shared sort of foundation is really helpful. So if you have, you've already talked about, hey, what are kind of our values for our kids, what kind of do we envision for them in our family, there's already that foundational agreement. And if you haven't done that and something like this comes up, now is the time to do it, right? To say, hey, this is something that I've been noticing a lot. And oftentimes it might even be like, I'm noticing that I'm the parent that responds more quickly to that. And it doesn't seem to bother you as much. Can we talk about that? What's that about for you? So again, it's soliciting that feedback. And your partner might say something like, well, I mean, 4-year-olds hit, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, or even like, I feel like they kind of need to learn to defend themselves. Like, and so that's the place, where you're like, okay, well, we probably need to talk about this because that is not a behavior I want to encourage. So having that shared vision. And then I think making sure, because it is really healthy for our kids to have consistency in the ways that we discipline. And also having in a difficult parenting moment to be able to ask for support from your partner is really helpful too. And so having that, sometimes it is something that's like, wow, this is a behavior that's happening a lot. We need to have a very clear plan for how you respond to it, so that the same thing doesn't keep happening over and over. And we're just sort of like winging our response to it. But when this happens, what are your ideas for how we can jump in? Here are some of mine.
Yeah, keeping those lines of communication open.
Yeah.
And just having sort of those consistent check-ins with each other, which sometimes when life gets busy, we miss them and we realize that months have gone by and maybe we haven't checked in. So I like that you keep reiterating, like, talking to your partner about these things specifically.
Yeah. And I do really think that having check-in rituals is kind of an important piece of that, because you're right. We do get busy. And maybe sometimes when the kids go to bed, we're just too tired and that we don't want to talk about those things. And so it is being mindful of, what time are we setting aside for this? And it also kind of takes away from, date night turning into those things. But being able to say, we're going to have this very specific time that we check in about how things are going with our family, so that when we are trying to spend just connected time together, it's not about us problem solving all of the things happening in our family, but it's just about us being able to love and appreciate and spend time together.
Yeah, such a good point. I just feel you on that date night thing, because that's usually when we check in. And then it's about the household. It's never fun. It's like work. It kind of feels like work.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I know we're getting tight on time. So I want to jump into part 3, which is sharing the load of parenthood. Could we talk a little bit about how we divide and conquer that load of parenthood? So that maybe, and something we say at Maple all the time is, it's not 1950, it's 50-50. But 50-50 looks different for every household. So, generally what we find though is that there's a primary caregiver and a secondary caregiver. And that caregiver that is the primary caregiver gives about 80%. So it follows that sort of 80-20 rule. Do you have any suggestions for that divide and conquer and how to do it better at home?
Well, I think, one of the things that, I'm a broken record on communication, because it's such an essential component of parenting together. And, I think even if the divide is not 50-50, if it's 80-20, 90-10, whatever it is, I think that if those are things that you've talked about and you're feeling appreciated for, that goes a long way towards dispelling some of the frustrations that come with that. And again, I think this is where kind of keeping in mind that our partners can't read our minds, and that people operate differently. So I might even be feeling like I'm carrying 80% of the household load, but I may also just not have a really good awareness of what, my partner is doing on a regular basis, or kind of what is even his mental load. And so for me to be able to say, hey, here are the things that I'm noticing that you do in our family. Here are the things that I'm feeling like I'm doing. I'm feeling really worn down and weary with all of this. Like, I want to hear your perspective on this. How are you seeing this take shape? And again, it's starting that conversation, because what we do with kind of that load is that we just automatically fall into these roles. And I can personally attest. I started working full time this year, and I tried to start doing, and I had been working part time. I tried to start doing that and continue doing the exact same caregiving things that I had done for our family. And I about a couple weeks into it, I had to sit down with my partner and say, I'm noticing that I'm doing this and I need help. I can't continue to do this. And I know it's my instinct to keep doing these things. And so sort of saying like, I'm asking for support. Where do you think you could kind of fit into this equation? And I can say that like his response was, yes, like, absolutely. I'd never expected you to work full time and keep doing all of those things. And I'm like, oh, like I've just spent the last 2 weeks being annoyed with you, but you just thought I wanted to be doing all those things. So it's like, yeah, that's the mind reading we try to do. Right.
And I so agree. Something we talk about all the time at Maple is having one source of truth. So having one place where you're inputting all your household needs, all your parenting needs, so that you both have visibility across what you're doing. Obviously, we like our app, but you can do this in a number of different formats. And just having that place where you can both go in and be like, here's what's going on, here's what needs to go on, here, just a nice check-in and tracking sort of mechanism.
Yeah.
So how do we, and this is something that I hear, like, especially at Maple, like we hear this a lot from primary caregiver who's putting in probably more work at home or with the kids than the other caregiver. How do we talk to our partner in a healthy way when we feel like the load of parenthood is not equally distributed?
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like our partners maybe not pulling their fair share, because that's a very sensitive topic. Everyone's really busy and everyone's plates are full. So how do we talk to each other about redistribution without getting into that fight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one thing I think is kind of, I love what you're saying about sort of getting everything in one place. And yeah, if that's using like a tool like Maple or, those things can be so helpful because it's like, oh, wow, we can really visualize all of the things that go on in order to run our family. And I think one of the things that is so helpful is also kind of learning where to play to each other's strengths. So, I know that there are things that I could do, but that I'm not going to be as good at as my partner. And so some of that is also just verbalizing, like, here are the things that I know. I'm super organized and I will pay all of our bills on time. And it's actually like, I feel good being in control of that. And so being able to say like, hey, this is something I feel like I've taken on. You can just completely take this off your radar. And so I think there's kind of that back and forth of just being able to say like, this is a strength I have and something I know I can bring to the table. What do you feel like your strengths are? What are the things you want to take on? And then another piece of that too is also, I think we really do have to talk about kind of what our like thresholds are and what our expectations are, because I have a much lower threshold for having a messy house than my partner does. And this is just something that has to be a conversation between us. And to a certain degree, I can say, I need you to help me with this. And I also have to understand that there is like his threshold is always going to be different than mine. And so his level of like, he won't notice it. And it's unfair for me to expect him to notice it. So if I want it to be that neat all the time, there has to be some willingness on my part to take on kind of the extra brunt of that. Beyond like, hey, can we just agree that we'll each clean a bathroom once a week? Like, we can like task some of this out. And that's helpful. Like, how can we task some of these things out? But when it comes to those kind of perspective things, it's just a helpful conversation to have. And, I also know that like, I will never notice that the lawn needs mowing. So, it goes both ways.
It's so true, and my husband and I really got some clarification when we sat down and we wrote down everything that gets done in the household. And, he included things that I never realized that he was taking. And that wasn't fair of me. And he realized that I do a ton of stuff behind the scenes that he never sees. Like, when my eldest outgrows his shoes, I put them in a box in the garage for my second, for when his feet are big enough to grow into them. And then I order my eldest new shoes. And it's just sort of like, that's the mental load that's sitting in the back of your head. And so getting that all down on paper. And then I know this kind of sounds funny, but treating it like project management, where you assign a name against all the things so that we're just on the same page around that, to your point earlier, who's taking what, and what's on our plate and what that really looks like. And then getting really creative about getting help when you need it. So I know a lot of people maybe don't have extra money to be able to go out and hire someone, but calling grandma and saying, hey, we're really busy and struggling right now. Could you bring dinner, maybe twice a month. Would you mind helping us out and doing that, or watching the kids so that we can get some stuff done at the house? And grandma's only too happy to help, just didn't know how.
Yeah.
Or asking the neighbor, hey, I saw that you take your dog out on Wednesdays every day for a walk. Would you mind taking our dog? And then we would reciprocate maybe on the weekend.
Yeah.
The neighbor was like, oh my God, you do not. Yes, our dogs love each other. I'll take your dog for a walk anytime. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I love that, Lauren. I think that, kind of building that support into your life. And, I have really good friends who don't have family in town. They're, and what they have done is very deliberately kind of build essentially a family out of their community, so they've built relationships with neighbors, they've built relationships with friends, so that, and it's not just about receiving, but it's about saying like, I'm going to give into this so that, we can kind of give and take here, because we do need that, right?
It's so
We can't
true.
do it on our own.
No, it does take a village and a tribe. And what do you do when you don't have your tribe? It's impossible.
Yeah.
One of the moms in our neighborhood, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she is volunteered when, the random days that schools close, she'll take the kids to the park for a few hours. And then her big thing is like, if it's a weekend, I have so much to do. If you could take the kids, and we sort of rotate
Yeah.
at the park for like 2 hours, that would be so helpful. And just having that set up and opening those lines of communication is really wonderful, to be able to lean on other parents like that.
Well, and it really opens up just kind of that door to being able to say and I think one of the things we need as parents is to kind of normalize that it's not, some people pull it off like it looks so easy, but for everyone, we struggle, we have struggles, it's difficult. And to be able to say like, hey, this is hard for me too. How can I support you? How can we support each other? So I love that idea of kind of having that barter system in some ways.
I'm looking over all of our questions, and I think that we've done a really good job answering almost everything. And it's almost 1:00, so we're at the end of our session. Is there anything that you want to leave attendees with?
Yeah, I think I too am feeling like we covered a lot of ground here, and I don't want to risk repeating myself, but no, I'm so grateful to have been here. It's really fun talking to you, Lauren, and Jatha. I actually, what I really appreciate about the conversations I've had with you is kind of your openness to sharing the things that are hard about parenting and about partnering. I think that's really valuable for other moms and other, spouses or partners to hear. So thank you for that.
We're all struggling. I make a million mistakes every day, and I'm just so grateful to have time with people like you who have such insight and expertise, and just listening to how your perspective can help me in my own home. Just like so awesome. So thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. I have like a million scribbles. So I'm going to be pulling this together on sort of your steps for healthy communication and how you can get together as a team to raise a child, and what splitting the load of parenthood looks like. I'm going to create a blog article all about it. And
Awesome.
I'm also going to post this recording later and send it so everybody has it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren.
Lauren Weir, the head of family therapy at Lasting. And if you haven't already, check out Maple, because we will help you manage and run your household. Thanks everyone so much. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.